Thank you so much for joining us today for the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. Here on the Pastor's Potluck, it's similar to a normal potluck where you might get something that you want and there may be something that you just want to pass up altogether. And that's okay. There's something here for everybody. Our goal here is to encourage you and maybe in the process entertain you. If you're ready, let's dig in. Oh, well, welcome to another episode of the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. Hey, it's all good. Look, we know what to expect whenever we start these things. It's always going to be chaos and pandemonium. And
for some reason, whenever I start a podcast with you, I don't want to ruin it like I normally do. On the extra point, I always want to say something right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I never do.
Is it because it's
never,
me?
I don't know what it is. It never happens with this one. I think it's because we're sitting in these comfortable chairs and I'm ready to just have a conversation.
Yeah.
The other one, I don't know. And the other one we do on Monday, and I'm always feeling silly on Monday.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling silly right now. I'm in like full-on Good Friday and Easter mode, so my mind is like racing.
Yeah, we've got it's a crazy important week for those who are Christ believers and put their faith in Jesus. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is kind of like go through this, what we call our Holy Week, and kind of go through and talk through some of the events of this week, kind of break it down, extract some truth from it, and how we can hold on to those things and maybe get a better understanding of who Jesus was and is, and also celebrate the fact that we serve a risen King, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. So this past Sunday was Palm Sunday. Give us just a quick rundown. I know that we just did a big service on it this past Sunday, but just quickly, kind of like Palm Sunday in a nutshell.
Palm Sunday is the Sunday that the church celebrates the triumphant entry of Jesus, which starts up on the Mount of Olives, which is to the east of Jerusalem. Actually, if you're up on the Mount of Olives, you look straight over, you can literally in the first century, you would have been able to see the temple and all of that, and all the city and all of its glory and all of that. And so Jesus has his disciples go into town, grab a donkey that he's already prearranged. Somehow he's going to use this donkey because he knows that it's a donkey that's never been ridden or something along those lines. And so he gets that, and they bring it to him, and he sits on it and rides it down the Mount of Olives into Jerusalem, while the crowd essentially the message of the crowd is that Jesus is the King of the Jews.
Yeah.
Jesus is their king. Now, when they say that, they think something drastically different than when you and I say King Jesus. They're thinking Jesus is coming in and that donkey is going to ride right up to the palace, and he's going to sit down on his throne, and Rome is going to be a thing of the past, and the opposition of Rome and all of that's going to be a thing of the past, and that's not the freedom that he came to bring.
Now, wasn't there this idea that there was this idea of a very a larger and extravagant entry into the city, or was it they were believing that Jesus was going to be the king?
Yeah, they really thought that he was coming in to take the throne.
I always had this idea of remember in Aladdin, whenever he gets the genie and then he goes in, I always think of that's what they were thinking.
That's what they were thinking
of
for
this
sure.
king.
That he was headed right for the palace.
Yeah.
And he wasn't. He actually has something totally different in mind.
Yeah.
And so that's what's happening on Palm Sunday. There's actually something really neat on Palm Sunday. I'm gonna preach it one year. Just haven't got around to it yet. But in Ezekiel, Old Testament prophet Ezekiel, if you remember, during his time of prophesying, Israel was in real bad shape.
Mm-hmm.
They're being unfaithful to God, and Ezekiel actually sees a vision, a prophecy of the glory of God departing from the temple. You know that vision?
Yes.
So, and it actually tells you in that prophecy that the glory of God actually lifts up from the temple and heads out the east gate and goes up and sits on the hill that's to the east, which is the Mount of Olives.
Yeah, the Mount of Olives.
And it actually sits there. And so it's really interesting because after that point, the Jews did build that second temple that we're accustomed to, the temple that Jesus would have been in. But those scriptures, now there's all kinds of debate, like scholarly, about this. The scriptures never say that there was a moment where the glory of God came and dwelt in that second temple the way that it did the first.
Yeah.
Ever. So it's neat to think about that the glory of God departed through the east gate and went up on the Mount of Olives, and then Jesus' triumphal entry exactly reverses that, starting off on the Mount of Olives and actually comes down in through the east gate. And then the very next story that they tell in the gospel is when he goes into the temple.
Yeah.
So it's like the glory of God re-entering the temple, but in a whole brand new way.
Yeah.
And so it's a really neat reversal there when that happens.
Yeah, that is
when
pretty.
Jesus comes back. But I think most people put that event on Monday, right? The temple clearing.
No, it's I have this timeline of order, and it's actually on that same day.
Okay.
That he goes in.
I thought I was reading something earlier this week, but I may not be thinking about. So he went straight to the temple then and started clearing house.
Yeah. So the triumphant entry is literally, it ends at verse 10 of chapter 11, and then the next verse, verse 11, is he's in the temple.
Yeah.
And doing that. So the cool thing that I kind of want to like talk about is like we obviously we know Palm Sunday, we know Maundy Thursday, which is that time with the disciples, and he washes their feet and they're taking communion together, and then we know of his crucifixion and we know of his resurrection. But there's a whole lot that goes on in between those days. We see that Jesus curses a fig tree. We see that that his authority is questioned by leaders. We also hear of parables from Jesus. Some of the ones with like the parable of the two sons and the vine dressers, and then also the parable of the talents and the sheep and the goats. Obviously, we're getting a picture, and it's like we're getting like really in depth with who Jesus is.
Yeah.
During this time, leading up into the days that he's about to be crucified. The importance of these stories. Obviously, there's some truths that can be extracted, but is this just a reflection of everything that was happening before his triumphant entry? I mean, this is just Jesus 24/7, right? And we're just getting it documented in scriptures.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm gonna talk about at our Good Friday service briefly. Is that the timing of the execution of Jesus and all of this is not on accident.
Yes.
This is happening on Passover week. So what happens after the triumphal entry is like twofold, right? Jesus fulfilling prophecy and such, but he is also, in a very human sense, pushing the hands of the religious leaders to make sure they act in a certain way so as to where his crucifixion happens in conjunction with Passover, because the time has finally come.
Yeah.
So some of this, as I'm following along in Matthew right here.
Yep.
Let me get to the translation that I like. As I'm following along in Matthew, like if you go triumphal entry, watch how this is all directed at the religious leaders of the Jews to force their hand. Right after the triumphal entry, where he claims that he's Israel's king.
Yeah.
Which is already offensive enough to get himself killed. Then he goes to the temple, clears the temple out because of what's going on in the temple, and it was because of all of the corruption in the temple and all of this stuff. He drives people out of it. So he's then he goes and he curses the fig tree, and Israel has actually been called previously in Old Testament prophecy. He's been likened to the fig tree.
Yeah.
And so this whole little thing about the fig tree is another indictment on Israel, once again pushing pushing them to act again. And then you get some of these parables, all of them really aimed directly at Israel's leaders to continue to kind of add insult to injury to everything else that he's doing. If you get into Matthew 22, the parable of the great feast, the Chosen actually does a really cool job of talking about the parable of the feast, and how Jesus, like how divisive that was, because the whole idea that like, oh, the people who the feast were originally intended for, you're going to be the ones that get left out.
Yeah.
I mean, who do you think he's talking about there? He's talking about Israel.
Yeah.
That's Matthew 22. Then he goes around taxes for Caesar, that whole thing. Discussion about resurrection, which upsets the Sadducees because the Sadducees are a sect of Judaism that does not believe in the resurrection. You know, the most important commandment, all of this kind of like, hey, all the law and prophets hang on these two things.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, wait a second. Who are you to start saying what all the law and the prophets are about?
Yeah.
Whose son is the Messiah? That whole passage again, all getting after the religious leaders. And then Matthew chapter 23, the whole passage is all the woes to the Pharisees.
Yeah.
All the woes to the religious leaders of all the ways that they are completely. So all of this that's happening on Easter week is directly forcing the hands of the religious leaders to act. Because then you get Matthew 23, he comes to the bottom of it, he grieves over Jerusalem. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones God's messengers, how often I wanted to gather you together as a hen protects her chicks beneath her wing, but you wouldn't let me. Now, look, your house is abandoned and desolate, for I tell you, you will never see me again until you say blessing on the one who comes in the name of the Lord. And when he's talking about your house is abandoned and desolate, chapter 23, I know that this is obvious to some people, but sometimes we read the Bible like it doesn't make any sense. That is setting up what's about to happen in chapter 24.
Yeah.
So he is declaring a prophecy over Jerusalem of its very destruction.
Yeah.
That he then, in chapter 24, which most people have in error labeled this the signs of the end of time. That's not at all what this passage is about. This is about the destruction of Jerusalem, because what we just saw from the triumphal entry in chapter 21, chapter 22, chapter 23 is all about the indictment of Israel. Chapter 24, that would be super weird if he goes, oh, and let me tell you about the end of the world now. That's just absurd.
Yeah.
Of course, chapter 24 is continuing this theme of pushing the hands of the religious leaders as he starts going through telling them about the destruction of the temple. The destruction of the temple and the destruction of Jerusalem, which happens between AD 66 and AD 70. That's a prophecy that's been fulfilled. That's one of the greatest evidences of the truth of Christianity, that Jesus said that was going to happen. And then 40 years later, that's a generation, and he said that it would happen within a generation. All of that took place right there. And so clearly chapter 24 is largely about that. At one point, he does answer a question of the disciples about his second coming, but that doesn't happen until like verse 36.
Yeah.
But before that, he's talking all about the destruction of Jerusalem. And the way that I know that he was talking about the destruction of Jerusalem in Matthew 24 is because from 21 to 23, he's talking about the indictment of Israel and that ultimately they're going to get what's coming to them.
Yeah.
24 would make no sense if the whole passage was about the end of the times, because then when you come back to 25, the parable of the 10 bridesmaids, that's not about the end of the world. That's about the destruction of Jerusalem and people not being ready. The parable of the 3 servants, same thing. But you get to the big one, then he comes final judgment. This calls this final judgment, but this is the where is it? Yeah, this is the sheep and the goats, Matthew 25. And like, so who do you think he's talking about there? He's talking about Israel not taking care of like their people. So like it's one cohesive unit from 21 through 25 of a total indictment of Jerusalem, the holy city, and Israel, God's holy people.
Yeah.
It's a total indictment of them. That's what's happening. And all of those, like, and this is not just a bunch of disconnected stuff that people have gone, oh, that's about the end of the world. Like, that is such a like, I don't say it to be insulting, an ignorant way to read the Bible. If 21, 22, 23 is all about the Pharisees and the indictment of Israel, 24 has to be about that, especially if it comes back to it in 25.
Yeah.
It would just be weird to go like, oh, well, let's take a little pause right here and like, scratch Tim LaHaye on the back and help him out with his theology. Like, that's just a weird way to read that passage.
Yeah. One of the things that I find interesting in this, after all of these events happening, and then we see there's the Sanhedrin begins to plot to kill Jesus, and Judas is persuaded. I try to think, I'm not trying to humanize or whatever. Judas had his role to play in this, and that was his role. But I can imagine that seeing the tension, I mean, he was already a part of it leading up to this and this week, and Jesus is, the destruction is coming, and he says, I think it's earlier, he's like, if the next time I go back into that city, like, my time has come.
Yeah.
And but this tension that's happening, I kind of think like have you ever been in a situation to where you've seen the writing on the wall, and you're just like, okay, how do I not associate myself with maybe an event that's about to happen because I've been a part of it, and I see something that I don't want to be a part of.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that that's the mindset that Judas has been in. Like before I got saved, and we're out doing stuff with my buddies, and we're just, multiple days of just nonsense. And then eventually they're just like, man, my luck's going to run out. I see the writing on the wall, and there's this internal tension that you're like, I just don't want anything to do with this anymore,
Yeah, I think in a human sense, that's definitely where Judas was at. Like, he knew Jesus was headed for destruction.
Yeah.
And this is like proof the disciples really did not understand what was going on until the resurrection happened.
Yeah.
None of it made sense to them until the resurrection. Because, like, leading all the way up to this, he's told them now 3 times that's recorded in Scriptures. Who knows if he told them even more than that over a 3-year period of what was going to happen. And, like, so Judas is probably thinking, oh, this is a sinking ship. This dude's about to get killed, especially given the fact that, like, this, he just comes in claiming to be king. And perhaps had he gone straight to the palace and got on the throne, Judas would have made a different decision.
Yeah.
Right? But that's not what he went. And so Judas has to start thinking, well, we thought he was the Messiah. We thought he was God's final king. We thought he was the one that was going to come and overthrow the oppression of Rome.
Yeah.
Like, and so when he doesn't do that, then it's like, you know what? Let me see if I can make some money off of this and cut ties and get out. That in a human sense. There is a spiritual sense that would add another layer of complexity to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could see that in a human sense for sure.
Yeah. And so Judas is enticed and bribed to go ahead and betray Jesus. He's been given 30 pieces of silver. The next day is preparation for Passover and the actual feast itself, where we see one of the cool things is that the disciples during this time is master and teacher. The way that they are calling him, they have placed this label on him, and they believe it.
Yeah.
And then we also see this, one of the reasons why Jesus came, and that was to serve and not to be served. And there's this incredible act that Jesus does before they sit down and they eat, where he washes his disciples' feet.
Yeah.
Even more so when I think this is after they argue between themselves, like, hey, I'm going to sit next to him, and who's the greater between us? And then they're bickering and arguing, amongst themselves, and Jesus just is like, I'm just going to wash your feet.
Yeah.
like I'm gonna put myself on the level of an actual servant and take care of you guys.
Yeah, what happens on Thursday of Holy Week is such a preparatory thing, because it's like a little microcosm of what happens on Friday, just in a totally different sense.
Yeah.
Jesus is a servant on Friday as he hangs on the cross.
Yeah.
He's being a servant on Thursday night as he washes the feet of his enemies. Like, really, the most powerful moment of that ceremony is that he is washing Judas's feet. So he's literally, the next day as he hangs on the cross, says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they don't know what they're doing. he's actually living that out the night before as he washes Judas's feet.
Yeah.
Where he's literally going, like, this guy is going to, like, here in just a couple of hours, going to be one of the major causes of the most pain I've ever felt in my life.
Yeah.
The betrayal and all of this. He's going to be one of the central pieces of that. And yet I'm still going to show you all what it looks like. When I say to forgive your enemies, to love those that are against you and persecute you, I'm going to show you what that looks like.
Yeah.
And he does that beforehand, before Judas leaves. And that becomes one of the most powerful pictures of what it actually looks like to live a life that Jesus lived, is when you can do that for your enemies.
Yeah.
And that's what's so powerful about Maundy Thursday, is you get that, but then you also get for the 13 Jewish guys sitting around the table, including Jesus. They have celebrated Passover every year of their life.
Yeah.
They know how the night's supposed to go. They probably got it memorized. And when Jesus starts going off script to institute what we call communion or the Eucharist or the Lord's Supper, he is literally changing. Maybe I don't even know that changing is the right word. He's actually showing the fulfillment of thousands of years of Jewish history.
Yeah.
That, like, the Passover served its purpose up until now, but there's, and again, we're going to talk about this Friday night, there is a new Exodus, a new Passover coming in what Jesus is getting ready to do.
Yeah.
That now supersedes and is greater than the original Passover. That did what the original Passover couldn't do.
Yeah.
Right? And so that you just have to, like, maybe you felt this on, like, this is like the smallest, like, my guess is to an Orthodox Jew, they'd be like, this is so offensive. Because, like, this is going to, like, not seem like nearly as big of a deal, but, like, have you ever, like, celebrated a holiday with your family over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and then, like, one year something's different, and you're like, what the heck, man? Like, okay, so for me,
it was Christmas for me. We would always eat the same thing on Christmas, and then one year my mom was like,
just changed it.
Just change it, and didn't tell anybody. And we're like, even though it was a better meal, we were just already expecting, like, a Christmas turkey, even though we just ate it a month earlier for Thanksgiving. We just had Thanksgiving turkey, we had Christmas turkey. And one year we had prime rib, which is leaps and bounds better than turkey.
Yeah.
But I would just remember everybody.
But you know what you were expecting.
Where was the stinking turkey, Mom?
Exactly. My mom did that to us one time. I think it was Thanksgiving, and I cannot remember. Like, I think it was like she didn't make mashed potatoes or something.
Oh, that's like cardinal sin in the Bayhoff household.
Yeah, because that's my jam right there. And I was, like, offended. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, we do this every year.
Yeah.
Right? So that's like a very, very small scale. Like, I am not comparing what took place at the Last Supper to what happened at Thanksgiving 2018 in the Bayha household or anything like that. I'm just saying.
I wish I could have been there. Side note.
Yeah.
just to see you blow up.
There was mashed potatoes at the next holiday meal. I'll tell you that much. But, like, on a small scale, that's what's happening when they're celebrating the Passover and Jesus takes the cup. They're all accustomed to this cup. All the cups had meetings.
Yeah.
And he goes, and this cup is the cup of the new covenant, which is for you given in my blood. And they go,
what?
Huh? You didn't make mashed potatoes. Like, that's what's going on right here.
Yeah.
This is like, whoa. You're not allowed to change. You're not allowed to change Passover.
Yeah.
Passover is like the Super Bowl for the Jews.
I wonder if that's really solidified what Judas was going to do. He may have been on the fence, and then he's like, wait, you didn't bring no potatoes.
Right.
Like, get them.
To change Passover is so, like, unbelievably offensive to the Jewish community.
You're talking multiple millennia of tradition.
Yeah, and so that's what. That first moment, the disciples have to be like, "What is he talking about? That this is his body, this is his blood." Like, He just rode in as king 4 days ago.
Yeah.
What is he talking about? One of us is going to betray him. This is so bizarre. And it's so we're probably really harsh on the disciples because like when we read it, we're like, well, duh, why don't y'all understand what's getting ready to happen? And it's because we've got the benefit of the whole story.
Yeah.
It didn't click for them ever. And
living it out is a completely different.
Even after he died, they go back to fishing.
Yeah.
They go back to the old life because they're like, oh, well, I guess it's well, that was a fun 3 years.
Yeah.
But let's go get the boat back out of the shed and just go back to doing what we're doing. And that's why like they're out fishing when Jesus appears to them on the Sea of Galilee and calls them in for that. Like they're not thinking. So like what Jesus did that night in the washing of the feet and the institution of communion is, I mean, it just changed the course of history. It was unreal. Like, because especially in the first century and like in the ancient world, like something like washing the feet, like the humility was not a virtue early on, and actually it was a weakness. So like Jesus goes, I'm going to found a whole movement on what you all think is weakness.
Yeah.
Like that's mind blowing, which is why like, and I growing up Nazarene. Maybe some Nazarenes do foot washing. We never did, to my knowledge, growing up.
Yeah.
So when I came to the Church of God, even before I was on staff here, like the first time I came to a foot washing ceremony, I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on right now? Like, what are these people doing? And it's become like one of the most special things that I get to be a part of every year.
Yeah.
Because now I fully understand like Mondi, what it means, like rough translation is like the command.
Yeah.
Like, and we do it because Jesus told us to do these things. That's why for the Church of God, there's 3 ordinances that we follow: communion, baptism, but they also hold foot washing as an ordinance that is to be practiced by the church.
Yeah, you don't see that in a lot of other denominations because especially in the church in America, I think that it's man, I guess for a lack of a better way of putting it, it's beneath us.
Yeah.
And that's not even the purpose of it.
Right.
Like we are better than doing I am better than you, so I am not going to wash your feet. Like that's basically what we say whenever we don't live out these things.
I think the inverse is actually more difficult for us. I think it's somewhat easy. Like sometimes both sides of it's hard for people.
Yeah.
I find it easier to wash people's feet.
I find it too.
I find it much more difficult to allow someone into that intimacy with me to allow them to wash my feet.
Yeah.
I find that much more difficult because, and that's what that was the issue Peter was having. Like, whoa, wait a second, Lord. No, you can't wash my feet. I have to wash your feet. No, you can't come and get into my whole mess.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I think is so difficult for most people.
Yeah.
I think most people can put on well, if Jesus washed feet, I'll wash feet, and they'll wash it. But when it comes time for someone to come over in front of them, it's like, now you're going to be dealing with an area of my body that I'm real self-conscious about, or that I don't
wear
has
sandals.
Imperfections, and you're going to see really who I am in some sense, right?
Yeah.
That's what's hard for people.
Yeah, I don't wear sandals. I don't wear anything that show my toes.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm I'm not. I don't know. It's just I just don't want my feet.
There's like an intimacy to it.
Yeah.
That that makes folks uncomfortable.
And I think from both sides of this too, the washing of the feet and the receiving of it, there's something. Whenever you fully grasp like the meaning of it, and the heart behind it, for me it is such a humbling experience. It's humbling to get down on your hands and knees and wash somebody else's feet. It's even more humbling whenever somebody's washing your feet.
Yeah, you need both sides of that yearly for you to be reminded of, as a follower of Jesus, this is my role. It's to go and make a life out of washing feet, but also being okay with allowing others to wash your feet as well.
Yeah.
Like it's about being able to bless, but also about being able to receive blessing. Because
Yeah.
that's a big issue, that people don't know how to receive blessing, and you rob people of the opportunity to bless you.
Yeah.
And so we need both of those. That's what Jesus is modeling here, is this humility to give and to receive. And so that whole night is so special for that. It is like a little mini microcosm of what's happening on the cross.
Yeah.
This is what servanthood looks like. You get down, you take the lowest place, and the next day he's literally hung naked as a criminal.
Yeah.
In front of people. He's being shamed and mocked. I mean, he's totally exposed.
Yeah.
And he does.
I mean,
does all of that as an act of service on behalf of mankind.
Yeah. Makes me like even more eager to make sure that even though I'm on staff, and if I wasn't and I was listening to this, like I would want to hear the connection point of this, of where you're going in our service for Good Friday tonight at 7. And we want to extend that invite to everybody that's watching or listening, because, goodness, like I feel like I've been to church and we only been talking for like not that long.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we were trying to like discussing some of these, and then the Holy Spirit just put it on my heart. He goes, "That's what I wanted y'all to talk about."
Yeah.
And like, you know, we were tossing around some ideas like we always do.
Yeah.
And then the Holy Spirit just kind of gave me that little. That's where we're gonna stop. That's where we're going to end this, and then you need to invite people to our church service for that evening, and so they can experience the rest of the story, but also be reminded of the sacrifice that Jesus paid for each of us.
Yeah.
It's going to be a fantastic service tonight. Our worship team has just practiced real hard to really suit the needs of the service, and but also just paint a picture of what Jesus did for us that day. So, looking forward to it. Any last words?
Nope, that's it.
Except for mystery meat. I know. You'll be fine.
I'm going to do an Easter prank on that jar, and it's going to be empty next time.
Now, if you could remove one color in the whole world, what would it be and why?
Remove one color?
Yeah, one color. Like you have a least favorite color. Dude, it's the mystery meat for a reason. You don't know what's in here.
Yeah, it goes by multiple names.
Carrot.
No, I like orange. Some people call it lima bean.
Oh.
I call it baby poop green. Either way, I would get rid of that for sure.
That just because that's your least favorite vegetable?
No, just because I don't like that color.
You don't like I don't like the color of baby poop.
Yeah, that reminds me of rough times. I did not enjoy the diaper days.
I'm getting rid of orange.
Orange?
Yeah, orange.
Oh, man. The whole state of Tennessee is now mad at you.
And the whole city of Austin, Texas.
Oh, well, that makes more sense.
Yeah. I don't like anything burnt orange.
As
Can't root for any team with the color
as a
of
state,
pumpkin.
Yeah, as a state that I'm a fan of the larger school that is more prominent and has more success. I understand why you're jealous as the little brother in that state, but
all right, guys, we're gonna cut to the outro screen while me and Scott getting the fisticuffs. No, it's all good. Hey, we appreciate y'all once again. You're more than welcome to join us. We would love for you to join us.
Yes.
For our service tonight at 7 here at Southridge Church, and you can also join us online as well if you listen out of state. On our YouTube channel, the Southridge Church YouTube channel. We'd love for you to be a part of that service. It's going to be amazing.
I guess unless you're in Tennessee, then Jared just offended you. So
yeah,
and I probably just offended half the state of Texas. So
that's all right. And Will's back there laughing. All right, guys, we love you. Thank you so much for listening in with us today. We really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram. You can also watch the video version of this on YouTube as well. All you have to do is search up the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. From all of us here, we want to say thank you, and we'll see you next week.